Decide one thing before you judge me. I am Adriana Bell, 38, the Communications Director for Northbridge Food Bank, so I know how fast one careless sentence can bury years of decent work. That night, I was the wife trying to shock a husband who had stopped reacting to me, not the woman trying to end her marriage. I told Cameron he was not the only man who had enjoyed a taste of me. And when he removed his glasses to wipe the left lens, I read his calm as the same weak retreat I had seen for years. Then he said I was drunk and lying. The word lying bothered me more than his anger ever could, so I pointed across the room and told him to ask Wesley, the best friend he trusted more than anyone. Wesley held their old brass opener, and I was certain he would help me win. My name is Adriana Bell. I was 38 and directed communications for Northbridge Food Bank, where one careless sentence could cost a month of donations. I trained volunteers to answer uncomfortable questions with one clear fact, then stop talking before fear ruined the answer. People at work called me brave. I liked that word because it made sharpness sound useful. Cameron and I had been together for 10 years and married for 7. He was a physical therapist at a rehabilitation clinic. He could spend 40 minutes helping a frightened man take 3 steps, then come home and wait out a marriage argument as if patience alone counted as care. That was his gift and his flaw. Cameron never rushed pain. He also never seemed to understand that some pain grew while he watched it quietly. We had been good before I started measuring whether good was enough. On the first Friday of every month, we went to a used record store and chose one album under $10. At home, we cooked whatever could be made with the food already in the refrigerator. Cameron read the sleeve notes while I moved around the kitchen in socks, and after dinner he pulled me close for the slowest song. He was never embarrassed to dance badly when we were alone. I could not bear being wanted only in private. My mother had been the reliable woman in every room. She remembered birthdays and packed lunches. For 23 years, she kept the same haircut because my father said it suited her. By the time I was 17, he spoke to her like a familiar chair. Nothing was wrong with the chair. He simply stopped seeing it. My mother once told me that being dependable had made her useful, not desired. I treated that sentence like an instruction. Be fair. I did not wake up wanting to betray my husband. I wanted proof that marriage had not made me ordinary. Cameron's best friend made that proof easy to find. Wesley Hart had known Cameron since they were 15. They had skipped school together and once broken the same canoe. Years later, each stood beside the other at his wedding. Wesley owned an outdoor equipment shop and carried the kind of careless confidence Cameron had never wanted. Their friendship had an object. It was a heavy brass bottle opener with CB and WH, scratched into one side and summer 2003 on the other. They had bought it with fake identification during their first weekend away from home. The story changed slightly whenever they told it, but the opener remained real. At barbecues, Cameron usually handed it to Wesley before the first drinks came out. Wesley would tap it twice on the table and say they were still alive. Cameron would smile in a way that belonged to the two of them. Wesley's wife, Marisol, had joined the group 4 years after I did. She taught music at a public middle school and had the calm habit of listening through the end of a sentence before deciding what it meant. I mistook that for softness. The 4 of us spent birthdays together. We shared holiday dinners when travel cost too much. Cameron kept a spare key to Wesley and Marisol's lake cottage, and Wesley knew the alarm code to our house. Cameron did not call him a friend. He called him family. That was what made every early question so easy to answer. If Wesley texted me after midnight, I reminded Cameron that Wesley was family. If his hand stayed on my shoulder through the end of a joke, I said family did not need nervous rules. When Cameron asked why Wesley knew about an argument we had not finished, I asked why he wanted me to treat his closest friend like a stranger. Then Cameron would remove his glasses and wipe the left lens. He always used the inside of his shirt cuff, even when a clean cloth sat beside him. I read the delay as weakness. He needed time to make a simple feeling sound reasonable. The first time he asked me to step back from Wesley, we were at a neighborhood restaurant. Wesley had taken the chair beside me before Marisol returned from the restroom. During dessert, he leaned close to show me a message and left his arm across the back of my seat. Cameron asked whether we could switch places. I asked if he was seriously jealous of his own best friend. The table went quiet for 2 seconds. I counted them. Wesley moved his arm and laughed. Marisol returned to the changed seating and asked what she had missed. I said Cameron was testing whether marriage had removed his sense of humor. Cameron took off his glasses. He cleaned the left lens and asked me not to turn a private boundary into entertainment. I told him boundaries were often fear wearing a serious face. He did not ask again that night. 3 months later, I had a panic attack during our largest donor event at Northbridge. No one saw it happen. My hands shook in a locked supply room, and I could not remember the first sentence of the speech I had written. Cameron picked me up. He brought water and drove below the speed limit. He stayed until my breathing settled. Then he said I seemed to need space and went to Wesley's garage for 2 hours. I did not need space. I needed him to ask one more question. When he returned, he explained that he had been afraid of crowding me. I told him he always became careful when closeness required risk. His apology ended with the same claim that he had tried to help. To be fair, he had helped. He just left before the part I could feel. Wesley understood that complaint before I finished explaining it. I told him about the supply room in a message the next week. He said Cameron treated feelings like injured knees, applying less pressure until the pain passed. I laughed hard enough to save the line. That became our first private joke. Then there were others. Wesley sent photographs from his shop and asked which jacket made him look less respectable. I sent him draft headlines that were too rude for the food bank. He told me I was the only person in our group who did not speak to him like he might break. I told myself our messages were safe because Cameron had given me the person. 7 months before Wesley's 40th birthday, the 4 of us spent a rainy weekend at the lake cottage. The house sat behind a line of pine trees, with a narrow path leading to a wooden boathouse. Cameron brought old records. Marisol brought music quizzes for her students. Wesley brought enough food for 10 people and forgot batteries for the lanterns. The brass opener stayed on the table all evening. Rain struck the windows after midnight. Cameron went upstairs first because his back hurt from driving. Marisol followed after a migraine tablet made her tired. Wesley and I stayed by the fireplace with 2 drinks we did not need. He asked whether I ever wondered what would have happened if we had met before I met Cameron. I could have laughed. Instead, I said Cameron probably wondered the same thing but was too controlled to admit it. Wesley reached for the brass opener and found the table empty. We both remembered taking it toward the porch earlier, so we went outside to look. The rain had eased, but the path was wet. A light was still on in the boathouse because Wesley had checked the motor that afternoon. We found the opener beside a coil of rope. We should have returned to the cottage. Wesley said my name differently. I stepped closer instead of asking what he meant. The kiss lasted longer than either of us could call an accident, and the closed boathouse door stayed between us and the house for nearly 40 minutes. I will not dress it up. We crossed the line both spouses trusted us not to approach. When I returned to the cottage, Cameron was asleep. Wesley entered 6 minutes later through the mudroom. Marisol was awake at the kitchen table. She asked why his jeans were wet to the knee and why the boathouse light had been on. Wesley said the latch had blown open. I held up the brass opener and said we had gone to retrieve it. Marisol looked from his clothes to my hair. She asked why it had taken so long. I answered before Wesley could. I said the path was dark and accused her of making a boring search sound indecent. Be fair. If she had shouted or named a real accusation, I might have stopped. She only asked questions. Questions could be made to look ugly. The next morning, Marisol found a wet towel behind the mudroom door. I said I had used it after the rain. She asked whether Wesley had called me at 1:40 while we were in the same house. My phone showed no call. I had deleted it after he rang from the boathouse to ask whether Cameron was awake. I told her she must have read the log wrong. Cameron came downstairs while we were talking. He took off his glasses to wipe the left lens, then asked what happened after he went to bed. Wesley opened his mouth. I told Cameron we had searched for the opener and Marisol had built a story around wet shoes. Then I asked the question that ended every discussion for the next 7 months. I wanted to know whether he honestly believed his own best friend would do that to him. Cameron looked at Wesley. After one long second, Wesley said no. One word. That was all it took. On the drive home, Cameron asked why I had answered every question before Wesley could. I said somebody had to protect the weekend from Marisol's insecurity. He asked whether there was anything about that night I would be afraid to tell him. I said there was not. He kept both hands on the steering wheel. At a red light, he removed his glasses to clean the left lens. He waited as if silence might produce another answer. I gave him none. The episode did not become an affair. That mattered to me. Wesley and I did not meet in hotels or create secret weekends. We returned to our homes and behaved as if one closed door could remain outside both marriages. For 2 weeks, he stopped messaging me. Then he sent a photograph of the brass opener on his shop counter and asked whether an object could be guilty. I replied that objects were smarter than people because they stayed quiet. That became the joke. At the next barbecue, Wesley tapped the opener twice and asked if I remembered the night we nearly lost it. I laughed. Cameron thought we meant the rain. Marisol did not laugh at all. She asked what else had almost been lost. Wesley stared at the label on his drink. I said she needed to stop punishing everyone for one migraine. Cameron watched me. He removed his glasses, but this time he did not clean them. He asked why a simple joke had made Wesley unable to look at him. I said Wesley was tired of being inspected by his wife and his best friend. That was the second chance. The third came when Cameron saw a message arrive after midnight. Wesley had written that Marisol had asked about the lake again and that he could not keep doing this. I picked up the phone before Cameron could read the rest. By morning, the thread was gone. Cameron asked why I deleted messages with Wesley. I said Northbridge required me to clean my phone because it held donor information. That part was true. The policy did not require me to remove personal conversations, but Cameron did not know the details. He asked whether Wesley had said anything I would not want Marisol to see. I told him to ask his friend instead of treating his wife like a suspect. He did. Wesley told him we had been discussing Marisol's anxiety and that he deleted his thread too because he wanted peace at home. Cameron believed both of us. I saw relief in his face and mistook it for surrender. The relief was simple. He loved 2 people and wanted their answers to be true. At work, Sabine Ross became the person who heard the edited version. Sabine managed our volunteer campaigns and collected other people's bad decisions because her own life was orderly. I told her Cameron had become jealous of Wesley and that Marisol had turned one rainy weekend into an investigation. Sabine said couples who had been together too long became afraid of any friendship they could not supervise. I liked the sentence and repeated it at dinner. Cameron asked if Sabine knew the full story. I said there was no full story. That was the point. The closeness with Wesley continued in public because stopping would have looked like guilt. He sat beside me at game nights. I fixed his collar before photographs. When he touched my shoulder, I did not move away fast enough for Cameron or slowly enough for Marisol. I called that balance. Cameron called it disrespect. One evening, he asked for a clear boundary. Whatever existed between Wesley and me, he needed the late messages and private jokes to end. I told him there was nothing between us and accused him of using marriage to control the only friendship that challenged him. He said Wesley was his friend first, but that did not make my behavior safer. The words friend first irritated me. They placed me outside a bond that had existed before my name entered the room. I told Cameron that he had spent years giving Wesley the honest version of himself while giving me careful silence. He discussed our arguments in Wesley's garage and returned with conclusions instead of conversation. If I had built a separate language with his friend, Cameron had left the door open. He could not deny it. For once, he did not try. He said he had trusted Wesley with parts of our marriage that belonged at home. He admitted that avoiding my anger had made Wesley easier to speak to than me. That was true, and I used it like permission. Wesley began pulling away a month before his birthday. His replies became shorter. He stopped choosing the seat beside me. At a charity trivia night, he left before dessert and took the brass opener with him, even though Cameron had brought it. I asked if Marisol had tightened his leash. He said we needed to tell Cameron and Marisol what happened at the lake. We were standing in the parking structure under a light that clicked every few seconds. He looked older than he had at the boathouse, not wiser, only tired. I reminded him it happened once and had ended. He said the event had ended, but the lie kept happening at every dinner. I told him confession would not be brave. It would move his guilt into 4 other people's lives and force them to carry it. Why destroy 2 marriages over something that meant nothing? Wesley asked whether it meant nothing to me. I said that was exactly why it should stay buried. His phone was open in his hand. I saw Cameron's name above an unfinished message. The first line said there was something about the lake weekend he needed to explain. For a moment, I pictured Cameron reading it alone. I pictured him reaching for the left lens and finding no patient question large enough to contain the answer. That was the nearest I came to stopping. Then I told Wesley that if he sent the message, I would say he had pursued me while drunk and was confessing only because Marisol had become suspicious. He stared at me. I said I did not want to hurt him, but I would protect my marriage. He deleted the draft. I called that choosing both families. Afterward, Wesley stopped being warm with me. I read his distance as another form of desire. Guilt required something worth feeling guilty about, so part of me enjoyed watching him struggle. Marisol noticed the change too. 2 weeks before the birthday, she called me and asked whether Wesley had tried to discuss the lake. I said he had complained about her questions. She asked why he would complain to the woman at the center of them. I told her she had answered her own question by calling me the center. She wanted a rival because anger felt cleaner than admitting her marriage had become dull. Marisol stayed quiet through the end of that sentence. Then she said she remembered the exact time Wesley returned through the mudroom. 1:46. I laughed and told her nobody innocent memorized clocks like that. She ended the call without defending herself. The birthday was planned for a Saturday evening in a converted firehouse near the river. Marisol rented the main hall because Wesley loved old buildings. The brick walls still held iron hooks for hoses, and an original brass bell hung above the bar. A cedar-fired pizza oven stood in the courtyard, filling the entrance with smoke and rosemary. Sabine helped me write the beginning of my toast. I planned to joke about Wesley surviving 40 years without becoming respectable. Then I would compare his chaos with Cameron's safe habits. I called it harmless and honest enough to make the room react. When I showed Sabine the line about Wesley understanding women better than my husband, she stopped smiling. She said Marisol might not enjoy it. I reminded her that she had called my friendship healthy. Sabine said healthy things did not usually need rehearsed defenses. I accused her of becoming cautious because the food bank's board chair would attend. She said perhaps caution was useful when 4 people shared the same secret shape, even if only 2 knew the middle. I asked what that meant. She said it meant she would not help with the toast. On Saturday afternoon, I sent her the finished version anyway. The message showed as read, but she did not answer. 3 days before the party, I saw Wesley's name in Cameron's recent calls. 11 minutes. I assumed they were arranging the birthday gift and did not ask. The night before the party, Cameron gave me his last private chance. We were putting away the records from our first Friday dinner. He held the album but did not slide it onto the shelf. He asked whether anything physical had happened between Wesley and me. He did not hide it inside hints or another speech about insecurity. The question stood on its own. I counted 3 breaths before answering. Then I said no. Cameron put the record away. He removed his glasses and wiped the left lens slowly. He asked if I understood that he would rather hear a painful truth from me than a safe lie from anyone else. I said he was insulting both his wife and his friend on the night before Wesley's birthday. He asked me to answer once more. I told him nothing had happened. That was the 4th chance. At the firehouse, Cameron wore a navy jacket and the glasses I had chosen for him 2 years earlier. Wesley stood near the old bell greeting people. Marisol moved between tables with a list in one hand and a smile that looked painful around the edges. The brass opener rested beside Wesley's cake. Cameron had brought it in a small wooden box as part of his gift. Wesley saw me notice it and looked away. I decided he was afraid I would mention the lake. That gave me a warm, ugly sense of control. Sabine arrived late and chose a seat beside the board chair instead of me. Aaron and Fiona, friends from Cameron's clinic, stood near the courtyard doors. About 20 people filled the room, enough to make a good laugh feel large. I had 2 glasses of wine before the cake. Not enough to forget anything. Enough to stop editing. Cameron asked whether I still planned to speak. I told him Wesley deserved an honest toast. He removed his glasses. While he cleaned the left lens, he asked me not to use their friendship to punish him. That request made the toast necessary. Marisol thanked everyone first. She spoke about Wesley's noisy mornings and the way he always drove across town when a friend called. Cameron smiled. Wesley looked down at the opener. Then Marisol gave me the microphone. I began safely. I said Wesley had reached 40 without learning how to arrive on time. People laughed. I mentioned the broken canoe and the outdoor shop. Cameron raised his glass. The room liked me. I could feel it. So I added the line about Cameron. I said my husband believed he knew everything about me because he had survived 10 years beside me. The room gave a smaller laugh. Cameron kept his glass raised for 1 second, then lowered it. I said he was safe and predictable. Wesley, by contrast, understood that some women needed surprise. Marisol stopped touching the cake knife. Cameron asked me to finish the toast. I told him to relax. I said everyone knew he was the good husband, and I was only explaining that good husbands sometimes confused possession with knowledge. Aaron looked toward the courtyard. Sabine put her hands under the table. The music continued from a speaker near the old hose cabinet. The next laugh was thin, but I treated it as permission. Instead, I said Cameron thought he was the only man who had ever understood how I tasted. No one laughed. I softened the line by smiling. Then I made it worse. I told the room that marriage did not erase a woman's history and that other men had enjoyed a taste too. Cameron set down his glass. He asked me to give Marisol the microphone. I said his sudden sensitivity proved my point, especially when I admitted I had not been created on our wedding day. He removed his glasses. The room waited while he wiped the left lens with his cuff. Then he said I was drunk and lying to humiliate him. Lying. That word reduced me. It made me sound like a woman inventing desire because the truth was too ordinary. Cameron was not accusing me of betrayal. He was saying I did not have the nerve to be the woman I had performed for years. I asked if he truly believed no man after him had ever crossed that line. He said he believed his wife and his best friend had answered that question 4 times. There was still a way out. I could have blamed the wine and handed Marisol the microphone. Instead, I gave Cameron the one true accusation he could not dismiss. I said he had spent our marriage hiding inside silence, then carrying every feeling he withheld from me into Wesley's garage. He trusted Wesley with the parts of himself. He denied his wife and expected me never to notice the locked door between them. Cameron did not argue. He said that was true. The admission should have calmed me. It made me louder. I told him I had noticed everything. I said Wesley understood much more about me than Cameron could tolerate. Cameron asked whether I was still talking about jokes. I said I was talking about honesty. He told me honesty did not need a microphone. The line earned a quiet sound from somewhere near the bar. I thought someone had laughed at me. My face grew hot. I looked across the room at Wesley. He stood beside the cake with the brass opener between 2 fingers. He had not moved since my first line about taste. I told Cameron he did not have to take my word for it. His best friend was standing right there. Then I pointed at Wesley. I expected him to lift the opener in the way that always made our dangerous joke seem harmless. He had protected the secret for 7 months. I was certain he would protect it for 7 more seconds. Wesley's smile disappeared. He lowered the opener onto the table. Metal touched wood with a dull click that carried farther than the music. His eyes went to Cameron, then Marisol, then the floor. Marisol asked what I meant by telling Cameron to ask him. Wesley tried to say Cameron's name. Nothing followed it. The speaker kept playing an old soul song. A server carrying a pizza board paused at the courtyard doors, then backed out again. I laughed alone. I said everyone was making a dirty joke strange. Cameron asked whether I was now calling it a joke. I said I was. He asked if that meant I had lied to the room. I said no. Then he asked which part was supposed to be funny. Cameron put his glasses back on. He did not look at me. He asked Wesley how long. For years I had called that pause avoidance. He used it to keep anger from choosing his next sentence. Wesley gripped the edge of the cake table. Marisol asked whether this was about the lake cottage. That was the first cut I could not cover. She named 146. She named the wet towel behind the mudroom door and the open boathouse latch. Then she named the call missing from my phone. Each detail had been on the page of our lives for 7 months. I had simply forced her to read them as proof of her own insecurity. I told her she still had no idea what happened. Marisol said that was why she was asking her husband. Wesley closed his eyes. He admitted there had been one physical encounter in the boathouse and said it never happened again. The sentence did not create noise. It removed it. Fiona put down her drink. Aaron moved closer to Cameron without touching him. Sabine got up with her coat in one hand and slipped through the courtyard while I was still watching Wesley. I said it happened once. Cameron looked at me for the first time since the admission. I added that we had been drinking, and it meant nothing. Marisol asked whether nothing was what Wesley had tried to confess in the parking structure. Wesley looked at me. That look gave her the answer before he spoke. He admitted he had written a message to Cameron and that I convinced him not to send it. He said I warned him I would make it look as if he had pursued me. I told the room he was protecting himself. Wesley said he was done protecting either of us. Cameron took off his glasses once more. This time he did not wipe them. His folded glasses came to rest beside the brass opener. Then he asked Wesley whether he remembered the lake morning. Wesley nodded. Cameron asked about the barbecue joke and the midnight message. Then he named the deleted thread. Wesley nodded after each one. Then Cameron asked whether he remembered the call from 3 days earlier, when Cameron gave him one final opportunity to say if anything physical had happened. I had seen the call in his log without knowing what it concerned. Wesley said he remembered. Cameron told him he had trusted the answer every time. That was the part Wesley had used against him. Wesley stepped around the table. He said he wanted to explain. Cameron asked how a 15-year explanation became shorter after 7 months of lying. Wesley stopped. Cameron did not threaten Wesley or raise a fist. He looked at the person who had shared half his life and treated him like someone whose name he no longer needed. Then he turned to me. I said the words I had prepared for any discovery. The first was that Cameron had left me lonely. I reminded him of the supply room and the garage conversations. Then I counted every night he had chosen careful distance instead of desire. He agreed that he had made silence feel like abandonment. He said he had used patience to avoid conflict and had asked Wesley to carry conversations that belonged with his wife. Then he said none of that, put me in the boathouse or made me lie the next morning. I told him he was throwing away a marriage over one mistake. He said the encounter was one event. The betrayal had returned every time I made him apologize for seeing it. I reached for his arm. Cameron moved back before my hand touched the sleeve. Across the table, Marisol removed her house key from Wesley's key ring. She placed his car key beside the cake and said he would not come home with her. Wesley asked where he was supposed to go. Marisol said that question belonged to the man who had helped him hide. He looked at Cameron again. Cameron picked up his glasses but left the brass opener on the table. Wesley said they had been brothers since they were boys. Cameron answered that brothers did not need 4 chances to stop lying. He thanked Marisol for the party. Then he walked toward the courtyard. I followed him past the pizza oven. Wet air caught the smoke and pushed it into my face. I told him we could go home and speak in the morning without an audience. Cameron said I had chosen the audience. I promised there would be no more messages and no more Wesley. If Sabine had made the situation public, I said, I would leave the food bank. Changes came out faster than I could understand them. He put on his glasses and looked at me through both clean lenses. Then he said he had spent years believing calm meant trust. I had treated that trust as proof that he could be fooled safely. He left in Aaron's car. I returned to the hall because my coat and purse were still inside. Half the guests had gone. The others stood in small groups that opened when I approached and closed after I passed. I told Fiona that Cameron was turning everyone against me by walking out like a victim. She said he had not needed to turn anyone. They had been there. Marisol stood near the old bell with her coat on. I tried to tell her Wesley had been unhappy too. She asked whether I had ever once warned her before using that unhappiness. I had no answer that sounded like honesty. Wesley sat alone beside the cake. I told him he had betrayed me by admitting everything. He looked at the opener and said I had mistaken our shared secret for loyalty. It had only been shared cowardice. Marisol left without him. He called after her once, but the firehouse doors closed before he reached them. I picked up the brass opener from the table. I cannot explain why. Perhaps I thought Cameron would want it later. Perhaps I needed one object that had belonged to the version of the room before my toast. The next morning, Cameron came to the apartment with Aaron and 2 empty storage boxes. I had rehearsed 4 explanations before he arrived. It happened once. We were drunk. It meant nothing. I had been afraid of losing him. He listened while Aaron packed records from the shelf. When I finished, Cameron asked which explanation made the 7 months of jokes necessary. I said the jokes kept the night small. He said they made him participate in it without knowing. I accused him of choosing Wesley over me for years and then punishing only his wife when the friendship became dangerous. Cameron said he was not choosing Wesley now. He had blocked his number before breakfast. I asked whether 15 years meant nothing to him. He said they meant enough to make the lie worse. Wesley called while Cameron stood there. The name appeared on my phone because Cameron no longer received it. I declined the call. Another followed. Then a message from Wesley said Marisol had changed the locks and he needed Cameron to hear him once. Cameron did not ask to read it. He chose 6 records and the blue coat from the hall. His father's watch went into the second box. He left our wedding photograph on the shelf. I held out the brass opener before he reached the door. For the first time, Cameron looked angry. The anger stayed in his tightened jaw as he asked why I had taken the last object from the table after taking everything it represented. I said I had saved it for him. He told me to keep it. His petition for dissolution was filed that week, with a temporary household expense order attached. Cameron stayed with Aaron until he rented a 1-bedroom apartment near the clinic, while I kept our home only until the sale date. The joint account was restricted to bills, and the money reserved for our 10th anniversary trip paid the first round of separate expenses. Fiona stopped inviting me, and the monthly dinners continued with Cameron and Marisol at opposite ends of the same table. Marisol separated from Wesley, and Wesley lost both his marriage and the only friend who had answered his calls since high school. Northbridge kept me in communications, but Sabine handled donor speeches after the woman known for honest answers became the subject of one nobody wanted her to explain. I had believed boldness meant saying the sentence everyone else was too afraid to say. At Wesley's birthday, my boldest sentence exposed the secret and made 2 quiet spouses stop doubting themselves. I wanted proof that I could still control every pair of eyes in the room. The only part I had misunderstood was who the truth would free. The brass opener stayed in the kitchen drawer of my smaller apartment, its scratched initials dark with age. It was the only thing left that still placed Cameron Bell beside Wesley Hart.